intruder.
Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in. Today, I will be drawing fan art for a game called DUSK. For those of you unfamiliar, DUSK is a 2018 independently developed first-person shooter made and published by New Blood Interactive, and aims to recreate the look and feel of the old software-rendered shooters of the 90s. The player takes on the role of Dusk Dude, a treasure hunter of sorts who's come to the abandoned town of Dusk in search of loot, only to be captured by a band of redneck cultists. From there, the game takes you on a fast-paced and chaotic journey across 3 episodes, introducing new weapons and enemies as the game progresses. For this piece, I wanted to capture that feeling of chaos, taking inspiration for the colors from Dusk's digital comic book and reimagining it in the vein of that classic Doom poster. You know the one. The first enemy I'm drawing here is called the Wendigo. Wendigos are melee-only enemies who charge at you with reckless abandon for their own safety. The twist is, they're entirely invisible, and will only appear once they've taken damage from you. This makes for some very intense horror sequences throughout the game, which really is a welcome addition because these enemies are quite honestly thrilling once they're thrown into the mix. The enemy up there, which I just kind of cut out from drawing, is the welder. He's pretty much just a walking bomb who shoots fireballs at you. He's more of a hindrance to the enemies than he is to you, so I actually find him not to be an issue here. The enemy I'm drawing right now is called a Leatherneck, obviously inspired by Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is a major inspiration for the games. He's another melee-only enemy, and this one right here, ooh, these ones are evil. These are the Cowgirls. They are the most dangerous common enemy you will encounter in the game. Very gaunt, skeletal, moaning creatures who are half cybernetic. They like to shoot grenades at you over long distances, and they hit like a truck. In the background, I'm just drawing a few of the smaller cultist enemies. They're really not that much of a threat. They're easily dodged. So I'm just adding them to the background to try to add some more depth here. One of the things I really don't like about drawing is architecture, which is something I'm trying very hard to improve upon, and I'm spending a lot of time practicing on that here, and I think it turned out just fine. I'm adding this very imposing looking cathedral, inspired by one of the promotional posters for the game. Down here I'm drawing the scientist enemy, who is basically just the scientist from Half-Life, but he's just a little... Oh, there's my cat's paw just interrupting me briefly. He often likes to jump up and snuggle. Where was I? Oh yeah, the scientists are basically just the ones from Half-Life, except they're wearing a crazy mask and they like to charge at you and stab you with needles. And that charming lady right there was the Fork Maiden. She's a pretty dangerous enemy in herself, but she doesn't appear as often. Outside of episode 1, you're never going to encounter her. Now I'm starting on the inking, which is probably my favorite part of the entire process. I just like the feel of adding these inks slowly in and just watching my pencil work come to form, just seeing how it gradually creates something else. You know what I mean? It's difficult to put into words. It's just the most gratifying part of the entire process for me. I'm putting a lot of emphasis on shadows, especially around Dusk Dude's face, because he's covered by that wide-brimmed hat. So I really wanted to try and make the inks themselves act as their own color, since I'm intentionally restricting the kind of a color palette that I'd normally use. I'm only using red and gray, specifically warm gray for this piece, because I really wanted to capture that image from the poster. Just want to capture that nice, dark, grim, dusky feeling. And my cat just jumped up on my lap here. He wants some love and attention. So forgive me for my cursed cringe voice. I'll get better at this whole dialogue thing as time goes on. But for now, let's just work with what we got, shall we? Moving on here, I'm just going down and inking all the other enemies. I'm putting a lot of, I want to put in a lot of shadows there, but I don't think I put in as much as I could have. As much as I love the inking process, one of the things I'm kind of leery about is adding too much and risk ruining the entire piece. So I like to be a little more conservative than I should, when I really should just be more fearless. That's something I'm going to practice in the future. Just let my anxieties with inks go and just add as much as I see fit. And if it ends up screwing up, well, I'll just try to figure out a way to work around it. If not, oh well, I can always make another one. That's the thing about art, is learning from your mistakes is possibly one of the most important things here. Now you can see on the Wendigo here, I kind of screwed up the inking spaces in between his ribs, so it ends up looking a little lopsided. But I think that might actually end up working in its favor, because with the Wendigo being such a creepy creature on its own, just making it less uniform like that might actually make it seem more eerie, less recognizable. Or maybe I'm just being pretentious. The welder here, I'm just adding some inks around his face. He doesn't have a lot. I'm not showing his whole body. I'm just adding him in, kind of making it look like he's crowded in with the rest of these enemies that are just swarming Dusk Dude here. But I also just wanted to add enough to make sure that the viewer could recognize him. Leatherface there is just to junk in prevent some empty space from showing. I don't want too much empty space. On the other side of the picture that I didn't record, I added a few more of the other enemies that you'd see in the game, like the possessed scarecrow, the rat, and the soldier, who are all very interesting enemies, except the rat. I hate the rats, but I don't think I've ever met anyone who doesn't hate rats in video games. I don't really have much to say here. Let's just adding a few blood splatters to the chainsaw in black ink, which I later came to regret, but I guess I can just work around it. Like I said, maybe I can just reinterpret that as maybe oil stains or something. Now for the cowgirl, I wanted her to look very gaunt and skeletal. This is an enemy that's supposed to be like crawling out of a lab, just cybernetically enhanced with almost like a carcass, just reanimated with technology. So I made her, it's really just not good, you know? Oh, that's terrible. You'll forgive the little sounds of the scritching in the background. That's just me petting my cat so he doesn't start meowing. The cowgirl, I wanted her to look very gaunt and skeletal, so I kept so as with like everything else in here, I wanted to keep everything blocky and avoid round lines if I could, because I wanted to recapture that chunky aesthetic of the game. The game itself was built on the Unity engine and is intentionally using low polygon models with blocky textures to, again, try to recapture that feeling. The old 90s shooters such as like Duke Nukem 3D, Doom, and especially Quake. The movement in this game is where the Quake influences really show through. You can bunny hop to ludicrous speeds in this game, and it just feels so good to play. Moving on to colors here, I wanted to start off with a lot of reds, using mostly the grays as highlights, or D-lights, I suppose. But I ended up not liking this direction, and so I ended up darkening the hat a lot with grays. But that works in my favor because it ends up drawing the eye's attention towards Dusk Dude's face in particular, because the trick about Copic markers is that they are very transparent inks, which is why they only really show up on white or brightly colored paper. You can't exactly use them to high effect on darker surfaces. And one of the benefits of this is that you can layer the different inks on top of each other to get different tones and tints. For example, if I wanted to color something a dark gray, but I wanted to be a little warmer compared to the other dark grays, then I would put some red down first and then layer the dark gray on top of it. The red underneath the gray would show through to the gray on top, which would make that gray seem warmer and more red in comparison to the other colors, which is a very useful technique that I've used plenty of times in the past. When I said I was only using 2 colors, that wasn't entirely true. I'm kind of using the white of the page as a color in itself, and in order to kind of blend the other 2 colors in with that, I use the colorless blender, which is what I'm doing here on Dusk Dude's belly, because I just wanted the eye's attention to be drawn there, and the eyes are usually drawn to brighter areas first. So I kind of used that to make it look like the light from the piece is directly hitting him, and everything else is kind of reflecting around that. This is just me coloring the rest of his sleeve there, as he's dual-wielding his shotguns like a total badass, which is something you do in the game. You dual-wield those lever-action shotguns like in Terminator 2. You even twirl them around to eject the shells. The thing about this game, though, is that there is no weaponry loading. You can just fire your guns indefinitely, which doesn't make sense realistically, but this is not a game where you're trying to recreate reality. This is a game that's designed around fun first and foremost. So I made the one side brighter than the other because I kind of wanted that to be the direction where the light was coming from. And so as a result, I just wanted to try and balance the colors out to make it draw attention more towards the center of the piece as opposed to the side. I don't want everything to be uniform and bland. As I said, Dusk Dude himself does not actually appear in the game as an actual model. He briefly appears at the end for the final cutscene, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. I really think that anybody watching this unfamiliar with the game should go out and play it. This game is well and truly phenomenal, and I don't use this word lightly, but it is cat! I don't use this term lightly, but I do believe that Dusk is, in every sense of the word, a modern masterpiece. It is a game that I have played through several times, and I enjoy it a little bit more each time because there's always something new to discover. This game has so many different layers. For example, in the opening area, you can deal with the leathernecks charging at you traditionally. Just try to hack them down with your sickles and dodge their attacks. My second playthrough, I discovered a pistol hidden behind some barrels, which I was able to use to dispatch them more easily. On my third playthrough, I decided, to hell with that noise, I'm just going to throw these giant rocks at them, and doing so just instantly jibbed them. In which case I was able to proceed with the rest of the level without taking a lot of damage in that opening area. Jumping down here, I'm coloring the Fork Maiden, who is a very unpleasant enemy, aesthetically. I don't know what her deal is. She's kind of like a zombie or something, so with that in mind, I actually kind of took inspiration for the coloring for her from the Walking Dead comic books, which are a series of books that I greatly enjoy, and I think that she turned out very well. I'm quite fond of how the hands turned out on her. I hate drawing hands more than anything else in the world. Even more than drawing architecture, I hate drawing hands, which is quite unfortunate because hands are very hard not to include without looking clumsy or amateurish. The Wendigo, I took a lot of creative liberties in reinterpreting him which is a lot of fun in this piece. The models in the game itself are very low poly, as I've said before, so it's a lot of fun to kind of reinterpret them as a more high HD models, as you were. Like perhaps if there was ever a Dusk 2, maybe this is what I would imagine that the enemies would look like. I'm certain that the developers had the resources to make them look really good, but they intentionally made them look crappy. Because, like I said, they just wanted to recapture that look and feel of the classic shooters. The welder here is an enemy. For his mask, I really layered on a lot of inks because I wanted to make a lot of very, very smudgy blends. When it comes to blending with my markers, I don't exactly like to just layer on layer on layer. I like to be more conservative with my layering, because it ultimately saves me inks. But for there, I really wanted to make his mask look like just a piece of solid metal. So I layered on so many different inks there to make sure that area was really wet, so that the darker shades would blend in very nicely with the other shades. There's just me drawing the church window. I don't really show a lot of me drawing the church, or coloring it in actually. It was not very interesting. So there I added a few of the cultists. They're just tossing up one of their magic fireballs at Dusk Dude, and that in itself created the source of light, which was very satisfying to color in right there. Moving on, I'm starting to color the sky. Now the sky I want it to be very red because I wanted it to directly clash and contrast with all of the different shades of gray and red on the background. So I wanted the sky to be very bright to really just capture the viewer's attention. The human eye is naturally attracted to the warm colors, red, yellow, and orange over the cooler colors. So I wanted to take advantage of that and have this piece really just grasp the attention. And to do that, I decided to add a lot of red to the sky, just to try to make it more true to the game's name. Like this is a battle taking place at dusk. This is not actually like a scene directly from the game. This is more like a fan's reinterpretation, like that Dune poster I took inspiration from for the pose. That never actually happens in the actual game itself. It's more of like a approximation, more of a generalization of the entire game itself. Something I wanted to recapture here. This is not like you almost never see all of these enemies in the same room, except maybe in one of the later levels. I don't know. I haven't played that level for a long time, and anyone who has played the game knows what I'm talking about. Now I'm just doing some final touch-ups with my Prismacolor pencils. I like to use the Prismacolor pencils for these kind of touch-ups because they're very rich and opaque. And here's the final piece. I think it turned out very well. There are a few areas I could have improved on, but overall I think it was a fun experience. Thank you all so much for watching, and be sure to check out next time, because things might get a little bit bloody.